A school bully encountered the wrong person in the form of a 72-year-old woman. The moment she entered the scene, the laughter quickly faded. Deshaun Dillard, a 15-year-old boy, 6 feet 1 inch and already sporting a mustache he believed made him appear more mature, swaggered through the halls of Booker T. Washington Middle School in Toledo, Ohio, as if he owned the place. His attitude was one of arrogance, his shoulders squared, his chin high, and his hoodie halfway on, even when the cold made it uncomfortable. Deshaun was one of those kids who treated school like it was his stage. His presence was loud, not just in his words, but in the way he moved. Locker doors slammed, sneakers squeaked across the tile floors, and he bumped into others without a care. No one dared check him, not the teachers, not the security, and certainly not the assistant principal, who just gave a defeated shake of his head. On a Thursday morning, Deshaun strolled in late, as usual, with the first bell ringing behind him. In his mind, the school was on his time. As he passed through the doors, he quickly glanced at his phone and shoved it back into his pocket. He spotted a younger 7th-grade student rushing to the front office, clutching a broken laptop. Deshaun blocked the boy's path, causing him to flinch. "Yo, watch out!" he barked, and the kid apologized, unsure of what he had done wrong. Deshaun just smirked and walked on, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear. "Man, y'all always looking scared. It's just school, not prison." His boys, Rico, Jalen, and Snoop, laughed behind him as they followed along. Deshaun barged into the front office, the way someone might enter a locker room before a big game, even though he had no reason to be there. He just wanted to stir up some trouble, perhaps make something out of nothing. "Yo," he called out to the office. "Y'all got cookies or something? It smells like somebody's grandma's been baking." That's when he saw her, standing with her back turned, calmly positioned beside the secretary's desk. She wore a maroon skirt suit, black flats, and a wide-brimmed hat that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. She didn't even look at him. Her posture was straight, her shoulders squared. Deshaun couldn't resist. "Who grandma this is?" he asked, smirking. Laughter erupted behind him, but she didn't respond, not even a glance. The silence only fueled his desire to push further. He leaned closer, brushing against her on purpose as he passed behind her to lean on the counter. Still, she didn't move. Deshaun taunted, "Ain't you supposed to be in a nursing home or something? You lost, ma'am." Finally, she turned, her eyes locking on his with an intensity that felt like a laser cutting through him. "I suggest you back up," she said in a voice so calm, yet sharp enough to cut through stone. Deshaun blinked, thrown off guard. This was different. People usually stammered or looked away, but not her. He scoffed, refusing to back down. "Nah, I'm good," he said, stepping even closer. "You don't know who I am, do you?" The woman's lips curled into a slight smile, but it wasn't a friendly one. "I know exactly who you are, Deshaun Dillard." Her smile faded, and she added with quiet certainty, "Funny only lasts so long when life starts handing out consequences." Deshaun's boys, who had been laughing up until this moment, were now silent. Even Jalen seemed unsure, fidgeting by the door, wondering if he should stay or leave. The woman turned to the secretary. "Miss Ellen, could you please let Principal Weathers know that I've arrived? Sergeant Freeman is here." The room shifted. The mention of sergeant seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Deshaun straightened up a bit, his mind racing. "Sergeant?" His usual cocky attitude started to crack. Mrs. Freeman, without breaking her calm demeanor, told him, "I served 22 years in the Army. I've seen real problems, and boys like you, well, you're not problems. You're projects, ones I'm real good at fixing." The sting of her words hit him hard. "Man, whatever," he muttered, taking a step back. But the woman wasn't finished. She turned toward him, lifting her purse slightly, positioning it on her forearm like a soldier preparing for battle. "Where's your class, young man?" she asked. He didn't respond. Because I'll be in it starting today. Principal Weathers asked me to cover 8th grade social studies in room 214. Deshawn's heart skipped a beat. That was his class. His usual teacher, Miss Langford, had been out for a week on medical leave. Mrs. Freeman's presence was almost overwhelming. She wasn't even 5 feet 5 inches, but she held herself with a quiet strength that made Deshawn feel small. "Don't worry," she said, walking past him with purpose. "We have plenty of time to get acquainted." As the door shut behind her, Deshawn stood there in stunned silence. The office was eerily quiet. Miss Ellen, the secretary, peered over her glasses and said, "Boy, you just signed up for a lesson you ain't ready for." But Deshawn's pride wouldn't let him admit it. He muttered under his breath, "She ain't even a real teacher." But the assistant principal, shaking his head, disagreed. "She's more than a teacher. That woman trained soldiers, led a platoon. She was hired special because some of y'all act like this place is a playground." Deshawn felt something stir inside him, something unfamiliar, something that made him realize that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't in charge anymore. Later, when he arrived in room 214, Deshawn had never seen his classroom feel so distant. The flickering light in the hallway, the quiet whispers of students, and the feeling of being on the outside looking in. It was all new to him. Mrs. Freeman stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand, and the words, "Discipline is a form of love," were written in bold, neat letters. The students were quiet, too quiet. It felt like a different world. Deshawn's usual seat at the back of the room now felt too far away. "Glad you could join us, Mr. Dillard," Mrs. Freeman said without even turning around. Deshawn froze. The way she said his last name, without emotion, without hesitation, made him feel exposed. "Grab your seat," she instructed, and Deshawn hesitated. When he sat down, the weight of the moment settled on him. "I know most of you haven't met me yet," she began, finally turning around, her calm voice filling the room. "I don't yell. I don't chase. I don't repeat myself." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Today we're starting with something different. No textbooks, no Chromebooks. Just a question. Write this at the top of your paper. Who am I when no one's watching?" There were groans, but they were soft, subdued. Even Deshawn, who would usually make a scene, just leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. Mrs. Freeman walked the aisles, slowly, her every step purposeful. When she reached Deshawn, she paused. "Mr. Dillard," she said softly, "your paper's blank. Nothing to say?" Deshawn looked down, trying to act tough. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't want you to say anything," she replied. "I want you to think. That's your real problem, isn't it? You're louder than your thoughts, and that's dangerous." Her words hit him harder than anything he could have anticipated. For a moment their eyes locked, and in that instant, Deshawn felt seen. Not for the bravado, not for the noise, but for the scared child inside. The room was silent as she moved on. Her words lingered, heavy, as she spoke about two types of people: those who live by fear and those who earn respect. "Fear doesn't last," she said. "Respect does." Deshawn's thoughts were a jumble. Mrs. Freeman's presence, her clarity, her calmness. It shook him in a way nothing else ever had. His mind raced, but he didn't know how to respond. He felt something shift inside him, though he couldn't put it into words. Maybe it was the fact that she didn't flinch when he tried to challenge her. Maybe it was the way she didn't respond to his pride with anger, but with understanding. At lunch, Deshawn couldn't shake the feeling. He sat with his friends, but the usual energy was off. Rico was distracted, Jalen barely even spoke, and Snoop picked at his food. "You good, D?" Rico asked, finally breaking the silence. "I'm straight," Deshawn muttered. But the truth was, he wasn't. She had caught him off guard, in a way no one ever had. He wasn't scared of her fists, but there was something in her presence, Her words that made him feel small. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control. You did bump her, though, Snoop said quietly. And she didn't even flinch, bro. That was wild. Deshaun bristled, but something about the way Snoop said it hit him. Maybe it wasn't the fight he was worried about, but the truth she'd spoken, that he had been hiding behind noise and fear, and she could see through it. Deshaun tried to change the subject, but the weight stayed with him. By the time the day ended, he had made a decision. He wasn't going to let Mrs. Freeman walk around like she had the upper hand. He needed to remind her and everyone else who Deshaun Dillard was. So he made a plan. After the last bell, he went to the front office, pretending to need to speak with the principal. He knew Mrs. Freeman would be there. When he saw her again, she was still calm, still composed. Deshaun stepped up behind her, this time getting even closer than before. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his once again. "Didn't I tell you to back up?" she said, her voice soft but sharp. Deshaun clenched his jaw. "You don't scare me." "I'm not trying to scare you," she replied. "I'm trying to save you." He couldn't help it. His pride boiled over. "You don't know me," he blurted, and in a moment of frustration, he bumped her shoulder intentionally. It wasn't hard, but it was deliberate, and that was the moment Deshaun realized it had been his biggest mistake. The room was eerily silent. Miss Ellen froze. Mid-typing, a counselor who had just walked in stopped dead in the doorway. Even the office printer seemed to sense the tension and went quiet, as though it didn't want to be a witness to what was unfolding. Mrs. Freeman didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached out and gripped Deshaun's wrist. Not tightly, just enough to stop him in his tracks. Then she leaned in so close that he could feel her breath against his skin. "Let me tell you something, young man," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Where I come from, disrespect has a cost. And the problem with you is that no one's made you pay for it yet." Deshaun's face burned with humiliation. He yanked his wrist back, eyes flashing with defiance. "What? You gonna hit me?" he sneered. Mrs. Freeman didn't flinch. She stepped back, folding her arms with the calm of someone who knew she didn't need to raise her hands to make an impact. "I don't need to lay a hand on you," she said, her words cutting through him like a blade. "Life will do that for you if you keep this up." Before Deshaun could reply, the assistant principal stepped in, jaw tight. "Deshaun, my office. Now." Mrs. Freeman turned away from him as if the conversation was already finished, as if she'd already said everything that needed to be said. But Deshaun wasn't done. He was seething. "This whole school's fake," he muttered, trying to regain some control. "Y'all let some old lady come in here and talk like she runs things. I'm not scared of her. She's just mad 'cause she's old." Mrs. Freeman didn't even turn around. Better to be old and wise than young and foolish. Wisdom survives. Foolishness gets buried. The words hung in the air, heavier than Deshaun could have ever imagined. He didn't have a response. He sat in Principal Weathers' office, bouncing his leg nervously. His hoodie was half on again, like some kind of armor he didn't know how to take off. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Weathers sighed deeply. "Do you know who that woman is?" he asked, leaning forward, his voice serious. Deshaun rolled his eyes. Yeah, Army lady, retired or whatever." Weathers shook his head. "Number, she's more than that. She's seen war, real war, Afghanistan, Iraq, led men who didn't want to follow anyone, and they respected her. You think she came out of retirement to deal with you?" Deshaun shifted in his seat. "She ain't have to grab me, though." Weathers' eyes sharpened. "She didn't hurt you. She stopped you. There's a difference. And honestly, you're lucky she showed you that much restraint. You put hands on her twice. I didn't hit her. Deshaun muttered, trying to defend himself, though he knew it sounded weak even as he said it. Weathers didn't let it slide. You disrespected her twice, in front of staff, in front of students, in front of yourself. That last part hit harder than Deshaun expected. He didn't speak. He couldn't. She's willing to talk to you, Weathers said, but only if you ask. She's in room 214 now, packing up. Deshaun didn't move. He sat there for a moment, processing the weight of it all. Finally, Weathers stood up. You've got 10 minutes before she leaves. Deshaun walked down the hallway, his sneakers silent, as if the world had shifted. There was no crowd around him, no Rico, no Snoop, no one to perform for. Just him, alone with his thoughts. When he reached room 214, he hesitated before knocking. Mrs. Freeman looked up at him without a word. I didn't mean to, Deshaun stammered, unsure of how to start. She interrupted him. You meant every step, every word. Don't lie just because it didn't go your way. Deshaun nodded, unable to argue. I don't know why I get like that. I get mad, real fast, and then I don't even know what I'm doing. Mrs. Freeman studied him for a moment before pointing to the chair in front of her desk. Sit. He sat down. Do you think being angry makes you strong? She asked, leaning forward, her eyes locked onto his. Deshaun shrugged. I guess I don't like people thinking they can punk me. She shook her head slowly, almost sadly. You know what I learned in the service? The loudest ones are usually the most scared, but the quiet ones, the ones who listen, who wait, who know their strength, those are the ones you don't want to test. Deshaun looked down, a lump rising in his throat. I ain't never had anybody talk to me like that, he admitted, not in a way that made me feel like they meant it. Mrs. Freeman didn't say anything at first. Then softly she spoke. That's the problem. Y'all are so used to people yelling or walking away that you don't know what to do when someone stands still. Silence is its own kind of power. There was another long pause before she spoke again. You think you're broken? She said, her voice gentle. But you're not. You're bruised. Bruises heal, but only if you stop poking at them. Deshaun looked up, eyes glassy, his pride cracking just a little. You think I could change? She didn't hesitate. I don't think, I know. But you have to stop treating every kindness like a threat and every correction like an attack. He nodded. His voice was barely a whisper when he spoke again. I'm sorry. She stood up, walked around the desk, and rested her hand lightly on his shoulder. You're already starting, she said. Now don't stop. The next morning, Deshaun walked into Booker T. Washington Middle School with a different kind of quiet. There was no swagger, no posturing, no crowd trailing behind him, just his backpack on one shoulder and a head full of thoughts he hadn't fully figured out. When he reached room 214, the bell hadn't even rung yet, but Mrs. Freeman was already there, wiping down the whiteboard. Deshaun slid into a seat near the front this time, not because he had something to prove, but because it felt right. The class started, and for once, it felt different. Deshaun felt different. When Mrs. Freeman caught his eyes, she gave him a single nod. It was all the recognition he needed. But then came the real test. It happened during third period. Deshaun was walking down the hallway, minding his business, when Darren Clay, a bully from 8th grade, decided to make things interesting. He bumped into Deshaun's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. The hallway grew still, a few kids watching the interaction. What? You not gonna say nothing now? Darren sneered. Deshaun looked at him, and instead of reacting with anger, instead of taking the bait, he stood still, looked Darren in the eye, and said simply, You good, man? You need something? Darren blinked, taken aback by Deshaun's calmness. Deshaun didn't wait for an answer. He just kept walking, not running, not trying to prove anything, just walking. As he passed Mrs. Freeman, who had seen the whole thing, she simply said, "Progress." Deshaun nodded. He didn't need any applause, any recognition. The nod spoke volumes. Later that day, Mrs. Freeman didn't give a lecture. Instead, she told the class a story. It was about her first year in the Army, about the struggle, the doubts. But what stuck with Deshaun was one thing she said. Every one of you has that same power, but only if you stop wasting it trying to impress people who don't even know themselves. Deshaun didn't need any more words. He didn't need a pat on the back. For once, he was in control, at peace, and finally earning the respect he had always been searching for, not from others, but from himself. When the final bell rang, Deshaun waited for the class to clear out. He walked up to Mrs. Freeman and simply said, "Thanks." She didn't ask what for. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small folded piece of paper, and handed it to him. Inside was a quote, written in bold handwriting. "The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes it's just the most afraid." Deshaun folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He would carry it with him for a long time, long after Mrs. Freeman had returned to retirement, long after he'd left middle school. Because some lessons don't come from textbooks. They come from people who show up, stand firm, and tell you the truth even when it stings. And sometimes that's exactly what saves you. If this story moved you, share it. Because someone out there might be one decision away from a better path. And all they need is a reminder that change is possible.